Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer. I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. In our modern world, with its emphasis on science and rational thought, we tend to denigrate such backwards things as ritual. A ritual is something that is done for no other purpose other than that is the way it is supposed to be done. It may have religious significance, or it may have some old superstition associated with it, or it could be just a person's or group's way of simply doing something. Rituals tend to work best when they have no rhyme or reason. They are done this way because that is the way they are done. Of course, this very ritualistic component of rituals is the precise reason why people frequently believe them to be of little or no value. Anything that cannot be explained in rational terms is by definition ridiculous. Rituals are the epitome of this. Many people who faithfully follow a ritual of some sort find themselves wondering why they are doing it and cannot help but consider the practice to be something that they should have outgrown and cast aside. Nevertheless, many of these same people stick with their rituals, however irrational they may be. There is a story associated with the famous 20th century Danish physicist Niels Bohr. A scientific colleague visited him once at his home and was surprised to find a horseshoe on the front door. This scientist asked Bohr why he believed in such nonsense. Bohr's response was that of course he didn't believe that horseshoes bring good luck. He was told, however, that they work even if one doesn't believe in them. Although there is a regular parsha this week called Tzav, meaning command, we are going to focus on the holiday of Passover, which comes right after Shabbat ends. A Saturday night Passover doesn't happen every year, and when it does, it tends to be a big deal. There is the whole issue of having to clear out all the chametz, or leavened products, out of the house, and to make sure that no crumbs of bread or other things remain. This is particularly problematic when Shabbat falls right before Passover. There is no time to clean, and great care must be taken that the bread eaten on Shabbat doesn't remain around when Shabbat ends and Passover begins. Passover is the unchallenged king of Jewish rituals. There are other holidays, and there is Shabbat, and there are plenty of rituals on the normal days of the year, but they pale in comparison to Passover. The list of rituals can seem endless. Most of it concerns food in one way or another. Food is the omnipresent item at anything Jewish, and Passover is certainly no exception to this. The meal on Passover is called the Seder, which means an arrangement or order. This is not a meal to just dive in and stuff yourself. It has to be done in a specific way with very specific rituals, any one of which is fairly innocuous, but together amounts to a colossal bundle of ritual. There is the Seder plate, the central item on the table with half dozen or so types of foods, each prepared in advance according to family or cultural tradition. There's the copious amounts of wine that must be drunk, 4 cups at the very least. Many take the easy way out of this by drinking grape juice, but it's still quite a bit to drink. There is the telling over the story of the Exodus from Egypt, reciting the Haggadah. This could take anywhere from 15 minutes for those who want to rush through it to a few hours for those who really want to stretch it out. It comes with stories and Bible verse interpretations and all kinds of poems and weird additions that somehow found their way into the 2,000-year-old Haggadah. Some of these seem to fit into the general recitation, and others serve as great opportunities for anyone at the meal to offer their own brilliant ideas about what they really mean. There is sprinkling of wine when the 10 plagues are recounted, and a rousing chorus when the miracles of the Exodus are described in the song Dayenu. But the core of the Seder is found in an important passage towards the end. Quote, Rabban Gamliel, Rabban means the teacher of everyone, used to say, anyone who doesn't say these 3 things at the Passover Seder has not fulfilled their obligation. Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. Pesach, of course, is the original Hebrew word for the holiday of which Passover is a translation. But it also refers to the lamb that was eaten at the meal immediately preceding the Exodus. Matzah is, of course, matzah, while maror is a biblical word that means something like bitter, and thus is the bitter herbs that must be eaten. These three foods represented the meal of the Seder in biblical times. The Pesach was the roasted lamb or goat that was prepared in advance of the first Passover in Egypt that had to be completely consumed by morning. Matzah was the unleavened bread that the Israelites were commanded to eat on their very first Passover night with the meat, and which they took with them when they left Egypt. Maror is only mentioned once in the Bible, and its purpose is unclear. But the Haggadah, in the various forms it has come down to many Jewish communities over the centuries, tells the true purpose of each of these. This is the main theme of that statement of Rabban Gamliel. He interprets each of them as representing some central idea in the Exodus and the events leading up to it. The Pesach, this is a quote, the Pesach is because the omnipresent passed over the houses of our ancestors in Egypt. The Matzah is because our ancestors were redeemed in Egypt. The maror is because the Egyptians embittered the lives of our ancestors in Egypt. This is probably the oldest version of this famous statement of Rabban Gamliel. It is found in the Mishnah, the oldest version of Jewish law and ritual. In more recent Haggadahs, these short explanations are expanded slightly and biblical verses are added. Specifically, the matzah idea is expanded upon to read, quote, "This matzah that we eat, what is it for? It is because there wasn't time for the dough of our ancestors to leaven before the Holy One was revealed to them and they were redeemed." The biblical verse quoted describes how they baked matzah to take with them from Egypt, since the dough, their own dough, couldn't leaven because they were driven out and didn't have time to delay. It must be stated at this point that this ceremony of eating these foods stands a good chance at being the world's oldest continuous religious ritual. It is about 3,000 years old, a number that makes almost anything else seem young in comparison. The custom of eating the lamb went out almost 2,000 years ago, largely because the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed and the ritual slaughtering was usually done there. For much of the past 2,000 years, Jews have not eaten this meat, but only said some version of the words. The other two foods, however, are carried out as faithfully as ever, though there are many different customs surrounding them. We have to understand something about what these foods really mean. Rabban Gamliel gave us some hints, but he was pretty sparse in his explanation. The maror part is clear. Bitter herbs represent the bitterness of the past. It may come as a surprise that the bitter past should be remembered at a time of celebration, but there it is. The past, whether bitter or pleasant, is part of our lives, and it cannot be disregarded just because it is no longer present. It makes us who we are, and without it, we would not be the complex people that we are. Jews know this instinctively. It is part of being Jewish. The Pesach lamb was the primary feature of the meal way back at the Exodus of Egypt. It was to be eaten quickly, with everyone set to take off at a moment's notice. Its blood was smeared on the doorposts of every Israelite house to indicate that this house was immune from the effects of the horrific plague that was going on right outside the door, the killing of the firstborn. As superstitious and as ridiculous as that might sound, this was all they could do to ward off the plague. The plague was the reality of the present, and the only defense they had against it was to eat the meal and put the blood on the doorposts. It might appear to us to be no better than a horseshoe, but like horseshoes, it seemed to do the trick. Sometimes the only way to deal with the present is just to do nothing but wait and hope. The matzah among these three is truly a mystery. The Torah gives no indication why the Israelites were commanded to prepare and eat matzah at all. The expanded quote from the Haggadah seems to indicate that it was nothing more than a matter of timing. They simply didn't have the time for their dough to rise, so they made the matzah. But this belies the fact that they were commanded to eat the Pesach with the matzah. Which was it? a pre-planned food, or an unexpected consequence of running out of time? The likely answer is that it was both. They were told to eat the matzah as part of the meal in advance of the plague, but they also ended up baking it again when they had to rush out of Egypt. As Rabban Gamliel said, matzah represents redemption. Redemption not only happens in the present, but it is an ongoing event that extends into the future. It is not enough to merely be redeemed from one's current dire situation. That redemption must be sustained, or else it was not really of any lasting importance. In the case of the Israelites, they received both forms of redemption. They were saved from the plague, but they also carried their salvation with them when they left. In the case of the Exodus, the redemption was sudden. They could prepare for it in advance, but ultimately it happened in a brief amount of time, the amount of time required to bake matzah. The truly amazing thing about this ritual of eating matzah is that it actually worked. This ritual, as stated earlier, is about as old as it gets. The Israelites and the Jews have carried it with them wherever they have journeyed. It is one of the best known rituals in the world. It has served as a strange form of religious preservation that defies all logic. Wherever the Jews stuck with this ritual, they persevered. Wherever they didn't stick with it, they vanished into the wider society around them. Matzah represents redemption. Not only did it represent redemption from slavery in Egypt, it would also serve to represent redemption throughout the future. Why was such a symbol chosen for redemption? Perhaps it is because, like Rabban Gamliel suggested, matzah conveys the idea that God can become revealed at any moment, and every moment is a worthy time for redemption. To be Jewish means to be constantly on the watch for such moments. They are what makes life worth living. Shabbat Shalom, and have a joyous Passover.